Chapter 1, The Gathering at Green Haven. Late June sunlight painted the rolling West Sussex countryside in soft gold as the motorcar rolled up the gravel drive of Greenhaven Manor. Hawksworth hedges, trimmed to perfection, flanked the approach, while rose-clad trellises framed the broad steps. Inside, the hall breathed cool marble and cedar polish, punctuated by the faint chime of distant birdsong. Through tall windows, the ancient oaks whispered in a gentle breeze, as though conspiring in hushed tones about the day's forthcoming events. For Lady Penelope Cranley, this weekend fete marked the grand unveiling of a prized Italian portrait, and already the household hummed with anticipation. By 3 o'clock, the guests began to trickle in. Sir Hugo Wentworth, recently retired from His Majesty's Navy, arrived with the brisk stride of a man accustomed to command. His trim uniform jacket bore the insignia of long service. Close behind was Evelina Ross, whose silver-grey gown rustled like spun moonlight as she descended from her carriage. The late Mr. Ross's daughter carried herself with delicate poise, though her anxious eyes betrayed a sensitive spirit. Mr. James Poulter, an art dealer from London's Burlington Arcade, alighted with an easy courtesy, his monocle glinting and his polished shoes tapping a precise rhythm against the flagstones. Lastly, Miss Agatha Pemberton, an aspiring watercolorist, swept forward in a simple muslin dress, her paint-splattered gloves tucked discreetly into a reticule. Each guest offered Lady Cranley an appropriate greeting, yet Poirot, deep in his seat by the entrance, witnessed more than mere pleasantries. Hercule Poirot's arrival had gone almost unnoticed. With the immaculate symmetry of his starched collar and the fine wax upon his moustaches, he exuded a serene command of space. His grey eyes, however, roamed with intense curiosity. He observed Sir Hugo's restless foot tapping beneath the table, noted the faint perfume of Evelina's erica blooms mingled with a hint of lavender, and saw the barely perceptible scowl on Mr. Poulter's lips when attention shifted from business to small talk. To the casual glance, the buffet of tea and petits fours drew polite murmurs. To Poirot's little grey cells, every crumb, every satin shoe, every dropped syllable was a clue awaiting interpretation. The grand salon, cooled by high ceilings and filigreed cornices, stood ready for the ceremony. Portraits of bygone Cranleys surveyed the assembling company, their painted eyes offering silent counsel. A mahogany sideboard bore gleaming silver trays of cucumber sandwiches and elderflower cordial. Beyond, an organ softly played a baroque fugue, its notes trailing amid the hush. Lady Cranley herself, attired in dove-grey silk, circulated with gracious smiles, presenting the portrait's history, a mysterious commission by a noble Venetian family, long hidden from public view. She spoke with measured warmth, but Poirot detected a tremor in her voice whenever the portrait's provenance was mentioned, a subtle sign that all was not as serene as the manicured lawns. Conversation drifted to art and family lore. Sir Hugo regaled the circle with tales of naval voyages through the Adriatic, leaning forward to display a bracelet carved from Venetian Murano glass. Evelina listened in half wonder, half apprehension, as though mindful of a memory best left unspoken. Miss Pemberton asked polite questions, her eyes flicking to a fine crack in the gilt frame of a neighboring painting. She jotted notes in a slender notebook, ostensibly about botanical details, yet her hand trembled when she wrote. Mr. Poulter, meanwhile, conferred in a low voice with the curator, Mr. Arthur Morton, an elderly gentleman of immaculately waxed moustaches and keen spectacles, about the work's market value, though he offered only thin reassurances. Behind the scenes, the household staff moved with quiet precision. The butler, Mr. Langley, oversaw the silver service with a measured nod. Mrs. Fairbanks, in her crisp cap and apron, arranged roses in delicate poses, and young Thomas, the footman, flitted between rooms with a tray of champagne flutes, his cheeks flushed from exertion. Poirot's gaze settled upon them with equal intensity. A servant's hurried glance at a guest, the tight grip of a maid's handshake, the way the china rattled as trays were set down, all conspired to form a web of human interaction rich with possibility. Over iced tea in the West Wing, where afternoon light cast intricate shadows on the parquet, Poirot allowed himself a moment's reflection. The painting lay behind thick canvas in the gallery beyond, its surface protected but conspicuous. Already, he discerned undercurrents, rivalries hinted at in clipped compliments, an undercurrent of debt in Mr. Poulter's strained smile, and, above all, the faint yet unmistakable sign that someone coveted the portrait for reasons deeper than mere aesthetics. His moustaches twitched ever so slightly, a signal to the beholder that the detective's mind was at work. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, guests retired to their rooms to don white tie for supper. In the dimming glow, Poirot stood alone before the gallery door, fingertips lightly pressed together in contemplation. Outside, the wind stirred the branches of the old oaks. Within shadows seemed to beckon. Greenhaven Manor, in all its pastoral charm, awaited a weekend that promised both pleasure and peril. And so, with perfect poise and quiet determination, Hercule Poirot prepared to cast his little grey cells upon the mystery that was about to unfold. Chapter 2, A Startling Discovery. Saturday morning at Greenhaven Manor dawned cool and misty, the dew still clinging to the rosebushes as the household stirred into life. In the servants' quarters, hushed voices passed between footmen and housemaids, each keenly aware of the importance of today's proceedings. The portrait, Lady Cranley's most cherished acquisition, was to be unveiled at high tea. Its arrival had been the talk of the kitchen and corridors for days. Yet there was an undercurrent of unease, a faint tremor in the staff's whisper that something, they did not know what, might go awry. Shortly after 9, Mrs. Fairbanks, the head housekeeper, ascended the marble steps towards the gallery, clutching a fresh bouquet of gardenias. At the threshold she paused, brow furrowed. The oak door, which she had firmly closed the previous evening, stood slightly ajar. A chill ran down her spine. She knocked timidly, then pushed the door with a gloved hand. A groan of protest rose from the hinges as the door swung inward into dim half-light. Inside, the scene was worse than any of them could have imagined. The gilded frame, once cradling the Italian portrait, hung empty on the panelled wall. Beneath it, the polished parquet floor was stained with a dark splotch. On the low velvet chaise, the body of Mr. Arthur Morton lay sprawled, one white gloved hand outstretched toward the vacant frame. His powdered wig had come loose, and a smear of crimson marred his crisp shirt front. A scrap of deep burgundy fabric, perhaps a sleeve, fluttered at the edge of the chaise. A cry escaped Mrs. Fairbanks's lips, and she stumbled backward into the hall. Sir Hugo Wentworth, summoned by the sound, hurried to her side, his naval training lending purpose to his haste. He bent over Morton's body, checking for breath, though it was already clear the curator was beyond aid. Moments later, Lady Cranley appeared, her mourning silk mantle caught in the banister. As she beheld the empty frame and the fallen curator, her composure shattered, she sank to her knees, quaking with shock. By the time Hercule Poirot arrived, called at once from his guest quarters, the gallery was in disarray. Servants clustered at the door, their faces pale. Scattered trays of breakfast pastries still lay on a side table, forgotten. Poirot paused in the hallway, hands clasped behind his back, his moustaches perfectly still as he surveyed the tableau. He noted the heavy scent of gardenias mixing with the coppery tang of blood, the way the morning light caught on the silver handle of a fallen decorative sword, and the neat gouge in the skirting board, as though something had been levered free. Without ado, Poirot crossed the threshold and knelt beside Morton's body. His gloved fingers gently lifted the scrap of burgundy, examining its weave and stitch. He rose and studied the footprint that marred the polished floor, a slender shoe sole, half obscured by a length of crushed curtain. He tapped the parquet with a fingertip, listening to its hollow echo. There was no sign of forced entry, the gallery's leaded windows remained locked from within, and the heavy door bore only Morton's own signet seal impression in the seal wax. Turning to the assembled staff, Poirot's voice rang calm and authoritative. "Miss Amis, I must ask you not to touch anything further. There has been both theft and foul play. The painting is missing, and our dear Mr. Morton is deceased. One fact is certain, the culprit is among us." He paused to let the weight of his words settle. A hush fell over the servants, whose eyes darted from one to another in alarm. Poirot's gaze, however, remained steady and analytical, as though already filing each thought away in his little grey cells. He stood and signalled for the butler, Mr. Langley. "Please assemble all the residents and guests in the drawing-room within the hour." No one leaves this wing, n'est-ce pas? As Langley hastened off, Poirot surveyed the scene once more. The empty frame seemed to gape like a mouth in silent accusation. And so the stage was set. Beneath Greenhaven's serene facade lay a web of motives, secrets, and half-told truths. With the keen precision of a surgeon, Poirot prepared to unravel them all. Chapter 3, Poirot takes charge. The morning mist had burned away by the time Hercule Poirot descended the sweeping marble staircase of Greenhaven Manor. Outside, the garden bloomed vigorous under the rising sun. Inside, the air was thick with apprehension. Before the drawing-room door stood Mr. Langley, the butler, his posture as rigid as polished silverware. "Monsieur Poirot," he intoned, "the lady and the guests await your instructions." Poirot nodded, smoothing his perfectly starched collar. "Très bien. I will see them shortly. But first, I must have a moment in the gallery." His eyes, dark and intent, turned toward the corridor where the crime had occurred. The gallery was hushed when Poirot entered, the chairs and easels standing silent sentinels around the vacant frame. The black stain on the parquet was now marked out by chalk tape, and the burgundy scrap lay preserved in a small glassine envelope. Poirot removed his gloves, placing them gently on a side table, then knelt to examine the footprint. He held a magnifying glass with elegant precision, noting the sole's fine ridges and the narrow width that suggested a slender gentleman's brogue rather than a lady's slipper or a heavy boot. The imprint's depth told of deliberate weight, one foot placed firmly, perhaps to steady a ladder or lever. Poirot allowed himself a small smile. It is already yielding its secrets. Rising, he turned to the envelope. Thicker than mere dress cloth, the burgundy fabric revealed itself to be fine wool, perhaps from a tailored waistcoat. He pressed his fingertips to the weave, registering the slight nap of the material. "This," he murmured, "belongs not to the household's livery but to a guest of some refinement." At that moment, Lady Penelope Cranley entered, composed yet understandably shaken. Her violet silk dressing gown rustled softly as she stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, forgive my intrusion, but the servants, and indeed the guests, are growing anxious. They await your guidance." "Madam, you shall have it," Poirot assured her, bowing his head with sympathetic gravity. "But first, I must reconstruct the sequence of events in my mind. And for that, I require a detailed account from your majordomo." He gestured to Mr. Langley. In the drawing-room, the assembled household and guests sat stiffly upon sofas and chairs, faces drawn, voices hushed. Sir Hugo Wentworth stood by the fireplace, arms folded. Evelina Ross sat with hands clasped on her lap, her fine features pale. Mr. James Poulter tapped his toe, and Miss Agatha Pemberton bit her lower lip. At Poirot's entrance, the room grew still. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his tone courteous yet firm, "I thank you for your prompt presence. As you know, two grievous acts have transpired, the theft of my lady's portrait and the lamentable death of Mr. Morton. It is my task to discover the truth. But to do so, I must first obtain a precise chronology of events." He turned to Mr. Langley. "Please recount the routines of yesterday evening and this morning in as much detail as you can provide." The butler cleared his throat and read from his ledger. At 1900 hours, dinner concluded. Mr. Morton returned to the gallery to adjust lighting. At 2100, the gallery door was secured. The last rounds of the house, sanitization of windows and doors, were completed by the footman, Thomas, at 2200. No further entries were made in the log until this morning's discovery. Poirot nodded, making exacting notes in his slim leather notebook. "Très bien. Now, let us consider the servants' observations. Mrs. Fairbanks, did you note any unusual sounds or movements during your rounds?" The housekeeper, a woman of precise diction, answered, "Only the faint creak of the door at around 9:30, when I came to deliver early tea. I did not enter, believing the curator occupied the gallery. All was quiet thereafter until I found the door ajar shortly before 10. "Excellent," Poirot said. "And you, Thomas, Did you observe anyone loitering in the corridor when you fetched Mrs. Fairbanks? The young footman shook his head, colour rising in his cheeks. I saw only shadows, sir. No voices, though I thought I heard a match strike, then the gallery door closing. Poirot raised an eyebrow. A match, you say? Intriguing. He turned back to his notebook, tapping a slender pencil. That would explain the burnt match head found beside the chaise longue. Lady Cranley leaned forward, her eyes bright despite her distress. Monsieur Poirot, I remember now that I saw a flash of light from beneath the door late last night. I thought it odd, but attributed it to Morton relighting a candle. Madame is most helpful, Poirot remarked. So we have at least 3 witnesses to separate phenomena, a noise, a flash of light, and a match strike. He paused, letting the information settle. Now, let us examine the footprint more closely. He requested the gallery's photographer, Mr. Denton, to remove the chalk tape, and with meticulous care measured the sole's length and width. 27 centimeters in length, 8 centimeters across, Poirot announced. I have a catalogue of brogue sizes at my disposal. It will not be difficult to narrow the field of suspects. Next, Poirot focused on the burgundy fabric. He had arranged for his companion, Captain Hastings, currently in transit from London, to send a small chemical kit. He produced a vial of silver nitrate and a dropper, gently applying a single bead of solution to the fabric. It darkened at the contact point, confirming the presence of human blood. Thus, the scrap is stained with Morton's lifeblood, Poirot observed quietly. A hush enveloped the room. Mr. Poulter shifted uneasily, Evelina Ross's eyes welled with tears. Poirot allowed the silence to persist for a moment, then spoke softly. I trust you understand that every detail, however small, is vital. I shall need to interview each of you individually, to hear your accounts without influence from others. Later today, I will retire to my laboratory and analyze the evidence further. At this, Sir Hugo straightened his shoulders. You have my full cooperation, monsieur. Merci, Sir Hugo. And thank you, mesdames and messieurs, for your patience. You will remain together under Mr. Langley's supervision until my inquiries are complete. I promise you, the truth will emerge. Rising, Poirot collected his gloves and notebook. He paused at the door, turning to survey the assembled faces one final time. Beneath the veneer of calm, he had detected fear, pride, envy, and something darker still. With that, he stepped into the corridor, his mind already racing through permutations of motive and method. Thus did Hercule Poirot assume command of the investigation, with methodical precision, unwavering courtesy, and an inexorable determination to pierce the veil of deception at Greenhaven Manor. The gallery lay silent behind him, but already, the echo of his footsteps signaled that the little grey cells were at full alert. Chapter 4, Clues and Confusion. By late morning, the hush that had settled over Greenhaven Manor gave way to a low murmur of speculation. Guests and staff alike whispered in corners, exchanging glances heavy with suspicion. In the gallery, Hercule Poirot moved with studied deliberation. He paused before the empty gilt frame, his little grey cells already at work, then turned his attention to the pedestals that once bore plinths and statuettes. One brass candlestick stood slightly to the left of its fellows, its base scraping a shallow groove in the polished parquet. Poirot bent to inspect it, noticing a faint smear of white powder on its side. He drew a long, measured breath. Mon Dieu, he murmured, this is no accident. With gloved fingers he transferred a scrap of the powder into a small receptacle, chalk, he deduced, of the kind used by stonemasons rather than artists. The implication was clear, the culprit had borrowed materials from the boathouse refurbishment and tracked them here in haste. His gaze then flicked to a small brass matchbox crushed beneath a chair leg. Discreetly, he pocketed the spent match head inside, noting its head had been bitten off rather than snapped cleanly. The act bespoke nervous haste, or possibly an attempt to disguise the brand. Poirot rose and surveyed the room, eyes lingering on the faintest irregularities, a single curtain tassel caught on the window catch, a smudge of mud beside the baseboard, and a slight warp in the panel next to the gallery entrance. Summoning Mr. Langley, Poirot requested that the gallery remain untouched until he had examined every detail. Then, in the drawing room, he began a round of questioning, this time more pointed, more precise. He first addressed Evelina Ross, who sat on the edge of a settee, her silk skirts rustling with nervous energy. "Mademoiselle, you told me yesterday you practiced sketching the portrait late into the evening. Might you recall exactly when you left the gallery?" Evelina's fingers twisted the fringe of her handkerchief. "It was past 10, she answered, voice quivering. "I painted by candlelight, and I rather lost track of time. When I left, I remember the match from my silver case. My father gave it to me, snapping shut. I thought the light would linger long enough." She glanced at Poirot, eyes wide. I did not touch anything else, I promise." Next, Poirot turned to Mr. James Poulter, who reclined in an armchair with an air of studied ease. "Monsieur Poulter, the ledger Mr. Morton kept listed this portrait as reserved for private acquisition. Yet you denied knowing of a buyer. Pray, can you reconcile this discrepancy?" Mr. Poulter's polite veneer cracked for the briefest instant. He cleared his throat. "I saw the entry, yes. But Morton's handwriting is idiosyncratic. He spoke of hope rather than commitment. I merely assumed it was wishful thinking." His voice hardened. "My business lies in authenticity, not speculation." Poirot inclined his head, though his keen eyes noted the slight flush on Poulter's cheek. "Very well. But I shall require to see that ledger." Finally, Poirot asked Miss Agatha Pemberton to stand. The young painter, cheeks flushed, clutched her sketchbook. "You examined the frame for cracks, did you not?" he inquired. She nodded, swallowing. "I saw a fine fissure on the right side, a hairline split that might have been exploited to force the painting free. I intended to mention it to Mr. Morton, but I feared he would see me as meddlesome." "An admirable caution," Poirot replied. "Yet one wonders why a novice painter would notice such a detail." He paused, allowing the question to hang. Miss Pemberton's lips trembled. "Art is my life, monsieur. I observe minutiae others overlook." As the guests dispersed, Poirot returned to the gallery. He placed the match head under a pocket microscope. Its irregular abrasion suggested a hurried light, consistent with Evelina's account. The chalk dust, he confirmed, matched that used by the stonemason Jonathan Blake, who had been working on the west wing. The tassel, too, he recognized as from a curtain in the drawing room. Then, in Mr. Morton's leather journal, kept locked in the curator's desk, Poirot discovered an entry dated the previous afternoon. Potential buyer confirmed, Swiss collector. Payment upon sight. Entry to be logged immediately thereafter. Strangely, the entry was written in pencil over a previous ink notation, the original words barely legible. Never reveal provenance until due diligence complete. He traced the faint strokes with a fingertip. Someone had deliberately obscured Morton's cautionary note, indicating a desire to rush the transaction. The red herrings now multiplied, an overeager buyer, a painter who insisted on solitude, an art dealer uneasy about profit, and a servant's rumor of a family quarrel over the Cranley inheritance. Armed with these contradictions, Poirot sat in the empty gallery and arranged his reflections like chess pieces. The misaligned candlestick was meant to draw attention, the charcoal residue should have been dismissed, yet here it was, the torn diary entry spoke of deceit, the ledger entry promised a windfall. Each clue pointed in a different direction, yet all converged on a single moment when calm shattered into chaos. He pressed his palms together beneath his chin and closed his eyes. A single scrap of burgundy fabric, the match head, the chalk, the tassel, the ledger, all whispered secrets. But which lead would reveal the murderer, and which was planted as a diversion? As dusk crept across the gallery floor, Poirot rose. He would need to retrace every step, revisit every witness, and test each hypothesis. The picture remained hidden, the killer walked freely among them. Yet, in the precise alignment of anomalies, Poirot sensed the shape of the truth taking form. Tomorrow, he vowed, the labyrinth of clues would yield its secret. But for now, in the stillness of Greenhaven's grandest room, the detective savored the intricate dance of evidence, knowing that, in due course, the little grey cells would piece together the puzzle. And once they did, no deception, however cunning, could withstand his methodical brilliance. Chapter 5, Shadows of the Past. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the tall mullioned windows of Greenhaven's drawing room, casting lattice-work patterns upon the hatch carpet. By the great oak mantelpiece, Hercule Poirot surveyed his company with steely curiosity. The hearth's embers glowed faintly, lending warmth to an atmosphere thick with unspoken tensions. Each guest sat as though on trial, Sir Hugo Wentworth with his arms folded across his chest, Evelina Ross clutching a silk fan, Mr. James Poulter tapping the arm of his chair, and Miss Agatha Pemberton tracing idle patterns on her reticule. Poirot rose deliberately and crossed to a glass-topped table where Mr. Morton's leather journal lay open. "Miss Amis," he began, voice soft yet resonant, "you have heard of the curator's former life in Florence, yes?" A collective murmur acknowledged the name. Poirot flipped the pages to an entry dated 15 years ago. Here, Morton writes of an incident, an accusation of misappropriation laid against him by a Venetian noble family. The affair, though swiftly settled, left a stain upon his reputation. A sharp intake of breath echoed in the room. Evelina shifted, brow furrowing. "I knew he guarded that part of his history jealously," she confessed. "He once warned me never to repeat what I heard. I feared his anger." Her voice trembled, as though recalling a scolding more than a threat. Sir Hugo's gaze flicked to his bootlaces. "We all have pasts we wish hidden," he murmured, but his tone suggested honest regret rather than deflection. Poirot nodded. "Indeed. Yet consider this, the noble family's fortune lay in a single masterpiece, now believed genuine only by a handful of experts. Morton claimed to have proof of forgery, which he concealed. If that painting still exists, someone might kill to keep the secret." He tapped the journal's page. "Note how the entry ends, 'They shall pay for their lies.'" Silence fell like a shroud. Mr. Poulter cleared his throat. "Forgive my bluntness, Monsieur Poirot, but are you suggesting that the family, or its representatives, have followed Morton here?" His crisp accent betrayed more alarm than indignation. Poirot pursed his lips. "It is one possibility. Or perhaps," he turned to Evelina, "someone present now has ties to those events." Evelina's cheeks paled. "My father purchased a purported Venetian portrait at auction. Morton tested it before sale and declared it genuine. Afterwards, he refused to authenticate a second piece, which was promptly bought by my late father's rival." Her voice faltered. "Father died shocked by the scandal. I believed the painting responsible." Miss Pemberton leaned forward, eyes bright. "So the motive could be revenge, against Morton or the family, or even against us, if we possess incriminating art." She tapped the table. "And someone here might have arranged the transfer of the painting before Morton learned its true status." Poirot folded his hands. "You see how past grievances cast long shadows. But we must ask, who among you would benefit most from silencing Morton? Sir Hugo, did you ever acquire Italian works during your naval voyages? Could you have felt affronted by Morton's prudence?" Sir Hugo shook his head. "On the contrary, I relied upon his expertise. He saved my collection from disaster more than once. I owed him gratitude, not spite." His eyes, however, flicked toward the journal with a hint of something unreadable. Poulter interjected, "I, too, respected his knowledge. Yet business being business, a forged masterpiece could ruin a dealer's standing." He swallowed. If I had lost faith in a painting I sold, I would seek every avenue to protect my clientele's trust, and my own reputation. He rubbed a hand across his temples. Poirot's gaze drifted to the tall windows. Outside, the oak's branches fluttered in the breeze like silent sentinels. "Let us not overlook Miss Pemberton," he said gently. "An artist's eye discerns authenticity. You noticed the hairline crack in the frame, yes? Could it not indicate prior tampering, perhaps an attempt by Morton himself to expose a fraud?" Her eyes widened. I only meant that he confided in me. He said he feared someone would steal the painting so that the evidence would vanish." She gripped the edge of her seat. "He feared the truth would be lost in darkness." A charged pause ensued. Poirot's expression softened as he addressed Lady Cranley, who had listened in solemn silence. "Madam, your late husband's collection included several Italian works. Is it possible he acquired something under dubious circumstances?" Lady Cranley's lips trembled. "He did, but never from Morton. Their professional bond was strong. Yet, weeks before he died, my husband was seen arguing with Morton in the gallery. They spoke in hushed tones, but he emerged pale as a ghost. The room's atmosphere thickened. Sir Hugo exhaled. I witnessed that quarrel. Lady Cranley's husband accused Morton of duplicitous dealings. Morton denied everything and stormed away. Poirot closed the journal and stood. We have before us a web spun from half-truths, threats made in anger, concealed knowledge, and fractured loyalties. Each of you has motive, be it grief, vengeance, or financial ruin. But who had the resolve to plan both theft and murder? He crossed to the window and looked out at the gardens, where shadows lengthened. Tonight, I shall inspect the boathouse and the stables. I trust the materials used in the refurbishment will speak tomorrow of who handled them most recently. Turning back, his gaze settled on the group. In the meantime, reflect upon your own shadows, and what lengths you would go to protect or conceal the past. With that, Poirot withdrew, leaving the others to their uneasy thoughts. The flickering firelight danced upon the walls as each confronted the spectres of memory, and the truth that lay hidden in the darkness. In the silence, only the crackling logs bore witness to the secrets yet to emerge. Chapter 6, The Puzzle of the Pedestal. Late on Saturday evening, the manor settled into a contemplative hush. The grand clocks had chimed 10, and the last of the guests had retreated to their rooms. Yet Hercule Poirot remained in the gallery, where the empty frame and its shattered seal awaited closer scrutiny. By the glow of a solitary lamp, he began his most exacting examination yet. First, he inspected the back of the frame itself. There, half hidden behind a loose veneer, lay the broken remnants of Lady Cranley's personal seal, an interlocking P and C pressed into crimson wax. The fracture ran in a jagged line, as if someone had forced the panel open from within. Poirot traced the crack with a single finger, noting tiny flecks of dark wood embedded in the wax. He murmured, this was no accidental breakage, the culprit sought entry through the frame rather than the door. He knelt to examine the floor beneath. The match head recovered earlier now lay beneath a magnifying glass, its charred tip bore an unusual grain, consistent with the antique box Lady Cranley kept in her boudoir. Poirot smiled faintly. A relic match, smoked by a greedy hand. He lifted the buhl candlestick that stood askew on its pedestal. Its base bore a smear of white chalk, too uniform to be accidental. He placed it gently back in line with its companion, marking the correct spacing with a pencil. Drawing a small vial from his pocket, Poirot collected the chalk fragments. Stonemason's chalk, he noted, referring to the boathouse renovations. Yet here, in the gallery. He turned to the slightest ridge on the parquet, brushing away dust to reveal a slender footprint. Worn into the floorboards was the horseshoe emblem of a gentleman's brogue, size marked 7.5. He carefully measured its length and width with a retractable rule, committing the exact dimensions to memory. As Poirot rose, he observed a faint thread tangled in the candlestick's decorative filigree. It matched neither carpet nor drapery, a single strand of burgundy silk, lighter than the scrap found on the chaise longue. He placed it between thumb and forefinger, examining its subtle sheen. Two fabrics, two colors, one crime, he mused. The fabric on the chaise came from a heavier weave, waistcoat cloth, whereas this is the lining of a lady's bodice. His attention shifted to the smashed seal once more. Within its broken heart he discovered a tiny shaving of lead, likely from the cushion upon which the seal rested. A careful inspection of the gallery's furnishings revealed a missing lead weight from the velvet cord that held the curtain aside. When he drew the drapery closed, the hidden mechanism clicked back into place, and the window's latch was concealed by its folds. Ingenious, Poirot conceded, yet clumsy in execution. An audible click at the gallery door drew his gaze. Mr. Langley appeared, lantern in hand, as if summoned by unseen force. "Monsieur Poirot," he whispered, "you wished to speak with me." "Indeed, Langley," Poirot replied, his voice even. "I require the precise locations of the curios and ornaments within this room as they stood last evening." He beckoned his butler forward. "Mark each position on this sketch." He produced graph paper from his satchel and began annotating the pedestals, the candlesticks, the easel where Miss Pemberton painted, even the fallen tray of antipasti. As Langley detailed each placement, Poirot compared it to his own observations. The brass statuette, Langley noted, had been slightly further left of center than today, a detail subtle enough for servants to overlook. Yet in conjunction with the misaligned candlestick and the shifted curtain, Poirot discerned a pattern, deliberate misdirection. The thief had moved one ornament to conceal their approach, trading the statuette's normal place for the candlesticks. Once Langley departed, Poirot closed his eyes and applied his favorite method, gathering the disparate threads of fact into a single tableau. He summarized mentally: a gentleman's brogue in size 7½ matches from Lady Cranley's boudoir, two distinct silk threads, one heavy, one light, stonemason's chalk, a broken seal and a missing lead weight, and a carefully engineered but poorly executed misalignment of objects. With a decisive nod, Poirot opened his satchel and withdrew a small black notebook. He jotted down his deductions. Entry point: frame seal broken deliberately, entry achieved through inner panel. Disguise: misaligned pedestal and statuette as visual ruse. Footprint: size 7½ gentleman's brogue, excludes Miss Pemberton and staff boots. Silk fragments: heavy burgundy from waistcoat, chap, light burgundy from lady's bodice, mademoiselle. Chalk residue, links culprit to boat house, suggests route taken through west wing. Match head, from Lady Cranley's antique collection, 2 matches missing from box. He closed the notebook and stood, lantern light throwing long shadows across the gallery floor. Outside, the wind sighed through the ancient oaks as though in anticipation. Poirot took a deep breath, smoothing his perfectly starched cuff. Tomorrow, he would confirm the brogue measurement against his catalogue, confront each guest with these particulars, and learn who among them bore shoes of size 7½ and who lacked an alibi for the west wing at dawn. Stepping into the corridor, he summoned Mr. Denton, the photographer, to document the framed seal, the candle smear, and the silk fragments. Each image would bolster his case against the eventual culprit. As the door closed behind him, the gallery settled once more into solemn stillness. Within those walls lay the whispers of betrayal, the stain of blood, and the promise of revelation. Poirot departed with the conviction that, piece by piece, the puzzle of the pedestal would yield its secret, and the truth would stand undisturbed in the little grey cell's final triumph. Chapter 7: Unseen Connections. That evening, Poirot summoned the entire household to the gallery once more. The empty frame, still marked by its jagged seal, stood as silent witness. Candles flickered in their sconces, casting wavering light upon faces drawn taut with anticipation. Lady Cranley, pale yet composed, stood beside Sir Hugo Wentworth, whose naval bearing could not conceal the tension in his shoulders. Evelina Ross perched on the edge of a chair, slender fingers twisting the hem of her gown, while Mr. James Poulter leaned against a pedestal, jaw clenched. Miss Agatha Pemberton hovered near the window, her gaze flicking from one guest to the next. Poirot stepped forward, hands folded behind his back. Miss Amis, we have examined each clue in isolation, the gentleman's brogue, the fragments of silk, the chalk residue, the distinctive match head, and the misaligned statuette. Now we must consider how these threads intertwine. He paused to allow the gravity of his words to settle. I shall present each fact in turn, and you will observe how one revelation leads inexorably to another. He held aloft the scrap of heavy burgundy wool. This fragment came from a waistcoat, a gentleman's garment. His gaze swept the men in the room. Yet the finer, lighter silk thread found tangled in the candlestick indicates that a lady was also involved. He placed the two samples side by side on a glass-topped table. Two participants, one plot, a guiding hand and an accomplice. Sir Hugo's eyes narrowed. Are you implying collusion? Precisely, Sir Hugo. Poirot nodded. Now, the footprint, size 7.5, narrow, with a shallow heel, unsuitable for a gentleman of heavy build, yet impossible for a lady's slender foot. Someone borrowed shoes without regard to matching their own gait. He tapped the sole print on the floor with a cane, the echo sharp in the hush. Consider who among you might have had access to another's footwear. Evelina Ross's cheeks flushed. She stammered, I wore my own slippers all evening. I saw no one change shoes. But the footprint leads from the gallery to the west wing, Poirot pressed. Where the boathouse materials were stored. The chalk dust upon the candlestick matches the mason's supply there. He fixed Mr. Poulter with a steady look. Who among you visited the boathouse recently? Poulter swallowed. I took a stroll after supper, yes, to clear my mind. But I returned promptly to my room. Ah, Poirot said softly. Yet two matches are missing from Lady Cranley's antique box, matches that bear the distinctive bite mark of your own impatient habit. He produced the burnt match head. You lit a candle here, in haste, to conceal your presence. Poulter's jaw tightened. Lighting a candle would not admit one into the frame, only to see. Which brings us to the broken seal. Poirot traced the ragged line with a fingertip. Not the door, but the frame itself, was prized open. Tools for such work were kept in the gardener's shed, tools that only two of you handled yesterday, Sir Hugo, to mend the terrace, and Miss Pemberton, to prop up your easel outside. His eyes swung to Agatha. You, I believe, borrowed a chisel under the guise of fixing your sketch stand. Miss Pemberton's hand flew to her mouth. I did borrow it, yes, to secure my easel, but I returned it immediately. Indeed, Poirot acknowledged. Yet the lead shaving found in the wax seal corresponds to the lead weight from your curtain cord, Miss Pemberton. When you closed the drape, you concealed the window's latch. He paused, letting the implication hang heavy. You prepared the gallery for entry. A hush fell. Lady Cranley swallowed. But why involve Miss Pemberton? Why entangle an innocent? Poirot shook his head. She is not innocent, she is infatuated with another, and her jealousy became a weapon. He turned to Evelina Ross. Miss Ross, your father's rival acquired a second portrait, one Morton refused to authenticate. You bore a grudge, yes? Evelina's lip trembled. My father's honor was destroyed. I sought proof, not murder. Yet your sketchbook carried Morton's notes, notes he should not have shared. You intended to expose him. Poirot's gaze softened only for a moment before sharpening again. But it was Mr. Poulter who stood to profit most. A forged masterpiece found its way to auction via your rival, Miss Ross. You, monsieur, orchestrated the web. Poulter's composure snapped. "Enough," he barked. "I did not kill Morton." "Perhaps not directly," Poirot conceded. "But you arranged for someone to disable the frame seal and distract the curator, thereby facilitating theft." Sir Hugo sprang forward. "You mean, Miss Pemberton, she—" "No," Poirot interjected swiftly. "She played her part unwittingly. The true architects are a duo, Mr. Poulter and Miss Ross, bound by mutual interest. He needed proof destroyed, she needed vindication." He produced Morton's leather journal. "Observe the penciled-over warning about provenance, written in your hand, Evelina. And the ledger entry promising a Swiss buyer, your client, Monsieur Poulter." Poulter's face contorted. "You have no proof." Poirot smiled thinly. "On the contrary. The match brand you favored, the footprint from the boathouse, Miss Pemberton's borrowed chisel, all converge here." He closed the journal with care. "I shall lay the evidence before the authorities. But first, I must know, why risk a friend's life, and why involve the innocent?" Evelina's sobs broke the stillness. "I did not kill him. I only wanted him to be exposed." Poulter's shoulders sagged. I thought I could manage it, that no one would be hurt." Poirot watched them both with a solemn gaze. "The little grey cells do not forgive carelessness where blood is spilt." He folded his hands. "Now, let us wait for the inspector." As the two culprits were led away, the gallery's silence returned, thicker now with regret than with mystery. Poirot lingered by the empty frame, his work almost complete. Outside, the wind whispered again through the oaks, as if acknowledging that unseen connections, once revealed, alter every life they touch. Chapter 8, The Little Grey Cell's Triumph. On the brisk morning following the dramatic confrontation, Greenhaven Manor stirred awake under a pale, mist-shrouded sky. Word had spread quickly, Poirot's little grey cells had solved the mystery, and the stolen portrait was to be restored. Gathered in the drawing-room once more, the principal characters, Lady Cranley, Sir Hugo Wentworth, Evelina Ross, James Poulter, and Agatha Pemberton, awaited the final unfolding. Even the household staff peered in through open doors, their anxious faces illuminated by anticipation. At precisely 10 o'clock, Hercule Poirot entered, immaculate as ever, his demeanor composed yet unmistakably triumphant. Poirot began with calm courtesy. "Madam, Sir Hugo, Miss Amis, we have recovered the missing canvas and laid bare the true motives behind this deplorable crime." Lifting the portrait from its protective wrappings, he held it aloft so that all could see the delicate Venetian brushwork gleam once more. "The painting was hidden behind a false panel in the boathouse," he explained. "Our thief expected it to remain concealed until the ink on the forged sale documents dried. Yet the use of stonemason's chalk on the gallery pedestals allowed us to trace their footsteps back along the west wing corridor and thence to the boat shed door." He set the portrait carefully on an easel and pivoted to face his audience. "Let us review, step by step. First, the broken seal on the frame told us the entrance was from within, not by breaking the door. The jagged line and embedded wood splinters pointed to the little panel at the back. Second, the single footprint, size 7.5 gentleman's brogue, ruled out all but one male suspect who wore borrowed shoes that night. Third, two distinct silk threads were discovered, one from a heavy burgundy waistcoat and one from a lighter bodice lining. Both belonged to our conspirators." He paused for effect. "Then, the burnt match head, bitten off rather than snapped, matched Lady Cranley's antique box, and told us that the culprit used a candle to conceal their presence. The chalk smears? Stonemason's material from the boathouse refurbishment. And finally, the ledger entry promising a Swiss buyer, penciled over Morton's warning, revealed a planned rush sale to conceal the true provenance of the canvases. All these clues pointed to James Poulter, the art dealer, and Evelina Ross, the collector's heir." Sir Hugo's face remained impassive, but Miss Pemberton, standing near the fireplace, rubbed her palms together. "You see, Miss Pemberton," Poirot continued with a gracious nod, "your borrowed chisel was used to prise open the frame panel, and the missing lead weight from your curtain cord concealed the window latch. Miss Ross enlisted your unwitting aid by asking you to adjust draperies for her secret meeting with Mr. Poulter." He turned to Evelina, whose composure faltered. "Madam, you sought evidence to restore your family's honor, but found yourself ensnared in a plan to profit from a counterfeit masterpiece. Monsieur Poulter, you desired both revenge and remuneration." Evelina's voice trembled as she spoke. "I saw only injustice in Morton's dealings, and believed that exposing him would clear my father's name. I did not intend murder." Poulter bowed his head. "Nor I, monsieur. Yet when Morton confronted us in the boathouse, a struggle ensued. He fell against the chaise, striking his head. He met Poirot's gaze. We panicked and fled." "Alas, panic oft precedes tragedy," Poirot observed gently. He indicated a small side table where, beneath a folded linen, lay Morton's journal and a fragment of the torn debt note. "The curator's last entry warned of forgery, which you erased in pencil to forestall delay. But human error remained, the note was backdated, the ink still fresh. That mistake, combined with our other clues, allowed us to reconstruct the timeline unerringly." Lady Cranley stepped forward, eyes glistening with tears. "Monsieur Poirot, how can we ever repay your brilliance?" Poirot inclined his head with modest dignity. "Madam, justice is its own reward. Your home is now safe, and the painting reclaimed." He gestured to the portrait. "Let it serve as a reminder that truth, though hidden, will always emerge when one applies both observation and reason." As constables escorted Poulter and Miss Ross through the door, the household released a collective sigh. Poirot lingered by the window, gazing out at the now rustling treetops. At length he turned to Sir Hugo and Lady Cranley. "I bid you adieu, Miss Amis. Your kindness has been most generous. My journey continues, and many mysteries await." With a final, courteous bow, he departed down the grand corridor, his moustaches twitching in satisfaction. Behind him, Greenhaven Manor resumed its tranquil beauty, the echo of Poirot's footsteps fading like the last notes of a grand symphony. Yet the memory of his methodical brilliance, of how he aligned minute fabrics, footprints, and powders into a tapestry of truth, would linger in every polished pane and marble hall. In the end, as always, it was the little grey cells that prevailed.